LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 12th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source tonight will be HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, although I will have a short Rudy Giuliani clip that kind of could be political comedy, but I'll also have about 3 minutes from his monologue that I will comment on. And then I will comment on the rest of my clips, which are all from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can follow along on my clip list here. I put a link to it down in the video description. These are my notes on my 11 clips and one still image I'll be showing you, mostly on the topic of Trump and racism, sort of the confluence of the Omarosa book and the one-year anniversary of Charlottesville caused most of the Sunday news analysis shows to, well, all of them to spend some amount of time on the subject of Trump and racism, even Fox News Sunday to some extent. And I'll have clips from all five of the corporate outlets on that. And then at the end, I will have one clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos where Rudy Giuliani discusses a perjury trap, and I will explain why what he's saying makes no sense from the point of view of a lawyer. I actually am a lawyer, so I will be committing legal analysis, and I will explain why the whole perjury trap idea is stupid when it comes to Donald Trump. That'll be the final clip, and down in the video description, if you're watching this as a recorded show, there'll be indexes between the two topics, so you can skip over to the perjury trap subject if you really want. But I did say political comedy, and as sort of a teaser for what you'll get in the perjury trap topic, here is a 3-second clip I think is kind of political comedy from Rudy Giuliani in that interview with Jake Tapper. Did I say it was on ABC? It's on CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper. I apologize if I got it wrong before, but here's 3 seconds from that clip here.
I mean, why would I say something that isn't true?
So, I don't know, is that comedic? I find that 3-second clip funny, but that is not the political comedy that I promised you. I am actually going to show you about 3.5 minutes from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, Bill Maher's monologue, which actually isn't available free on YouTube this week for some reason, but several other clips from the show are available. It'll link down in the video description. This is mainly on the topics I'm covering, just a little bit of Omarosa, and then actually mostly on the Trump tweet that I covered last week. You may remember where Trump basically admits collusion and throws Don Jr. under the bus for the June 9th, 2016 Trump Tower meeting with the Russians. And that will be, and the changing stories on that is part of Bill Maher's comedy here, and then a little bit of Rudy Giuliani at the end that I will discuss with you after we watch that 3.5-minute political comedy clip from last Friday here.
In the middle of all this week, Omarosa is out. I'm sorry, ex-White House official Omarosa is out with a book that she's pushing with a big reveal that Trump is a racist. Which begs the question, what is the opposite of breaking news? Could we have a Chiron breaking duh? But, you know, Trump has to tweet this shit because he has to distract people, because he's got so many legal problems swirling around his head. The Washington Post says this week that he was worried that Don Jr., douchebag von fuckface worried that had, I love this, wandered into legal jeopardy. Yes, poor people commit crimes. Rich people wander into legal jeopardy. And so he tweets and, of course, makes it worse for him and his own son last Sunday at 5:35 a.m. because Crack of Dawn is more than just a Stormy Daniels movie. This guy, I love that one. But so at 5:35, undoubtedly on the toilet, he tweets his latest version of what happened when the Russians came to Trump Tower, and this is his final offer. The other 8 versions are fake news now. Throw them out like a sharper image clock radio that charges your iPhone 3. They're just ridiculous. He says, this is his tweet now. This was a meeting to get information on my opponent. Totally legal, not. Done all the time in politics, not. This is his idea of truth. I know we denied it, that it ever happened, and then I dictated a statement that it was only about adoption, and then I lied about dictating it, but I'm telling you the truth now. I've grown up a lot since last July. We all do foolish things when we're 70. So we've kind of... We've gone from hope and change to hope and change your story. And Trump's people around him are just begging him to shut the fuck up about the trial and stop tweeting about it. I mean, stop giving Rudy Giuliani every day more to explain. He wasn't that fast on his feet when he was alive. Rudy Giuliani, he's got a new offer for Bob Mueller that Trump is willing to sit down to do the interview, but some topics have to be off limits, like why Trump fired Comey, what Trump said to Comey, and anything to do with obstruction of justice. My client has nothing to hide as long as you don't ask him about the things he wants to hide. It's just like saying, It's like saying, I'm willing to do the prostate exam as long as I don't have to take off my pants. That would...
I don't know. Bill Maher always goes for the sexual joke, even when it... there was the crack of dawn joke in there, but I don't know. The 2 parts I really wanted to comment on were right at the beginning and the end. First, the Omarosa breaking news, Donald Trump is racist. That's kind of one of the subjects I'll be covering more extensively in the video, and especially, and one of the things I'm not going to be covering as extensively as, say, NBC's Meet the Press covered it this morning, is Omarosa's book, which I don't think is, I would say, I would call it more of a flash in the pan than any sort of like big long-term news story in terms of, I'm not going to show you the clip where she plays a recording she made in the Situation Room with Chief of Staff John Kelly, although it's kind of amusing and interesting, and some people say it's even illegal to record stuff in the Situation Room. That I don't think is going to have any long-term impact. The whole idea of, well, I'll talk about that a little more when I get to the Omarosa clip, which I'm going to show after a few news summaries and then one other clip, I think, from CBS's Face the Nation, but I'm not going to show a news summary from NBC's Meet the Press because it was all about Omarosa, which I thought was way over covered on Meet the Press. They spent at least the first 35 minutes of the show all on Omarosa. I don't know if they had some sort of, well, she was NBC's Meet the Press was the only show where Omarosa appeared, although of the Sunday show, she'd been on NPR. I think she was somewhere else, and she's doing other appearances, so it's not that exclusive, but I don't know if they got some sort of like exclusivity that made them over-focus on Omarosa, but that's why there's no news summary from Meet the Press. Omarosa was briefly covered in a couple of these other news summaries. I think both CNN and ABC had good news summaries. Not so much the one from Fox News. I'm going to show you all 3, starting with with CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper, where the State of the Union is kind of confused, and I don't know if it's about racism, and it talks about the anniversary of Charlottesville, and then the Omarosa thing, and it's only about 1 minute and 16 seconds, which I'll talk about with you we watch together over here.
I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is kind of confused. Today marks 1 year since the deadly rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you might expect an American president to take the opportunity to speak forcefully against racism, especially with white nationalists and supremacists preparing to march to the White House, his house, this very evening. Instead, we got this single tweet, quote, "The riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans." All types of racism, all Americans. Critics of the president say this is language that seemed to echo the president's phrase from last year when he blamed violence on both sides. And his reluctance to directly condemn white supremacists, that caution a stark contrast with his daughter Ivanka's assertion on Twitter that, quote, "There is no place for white supremacy, racism, and neo-Nazism in our great country." Not to mention a contrast with the president's forceful takedown this weekend of his own attorney general, calling Jeff Sessions on Twitter scared, stiff, and missing in action. This as the president's legal team is locked in intense negotiations with the special counsel over whether the president will sit for an interview as part of the ongoing Russia investigation. Thursday night, the president dined with his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and the former mayor of New York is joined.
And like I said, I will have a clip from Jake Tapper interviewing Rudy Giuliani. Will be the final clip in a separate topic, the perjury trap topic. So if you're interested in that, wait till the end of the video. But the rest of that introduction from Jake Tapper sort of, I think, talked in general about the racism topic and the anniversary from Charlottesville, but not quite as in depth as ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Guest host Jonathan Karl, I think, did a better job and talked about how Trump's this year was quietly in New Jersey compared to last year, and there's even some talk of Omarosa in the package at the end. There are a whole bunch of clips here, but basically talks about how Trump's having a lot of problems with race and shows a bunch of polls, which is a criticism I'll have from regarding the Fox News Sunday interview with Kellyanne Conway. Did I mention there'll be two Kellyanne Conway clips, one from ABC's This Week and one from Fox News Sunday later? Well, Kellyanne Conway's in the title of the video, so you should be expecting that. And this is not the Kellyanne Conway clip, but this is, I think, the best news summary of at least the racism topic regarding Trump. And I think there's a little bit about Robert Mueller also in the 3 and a little under 3.5 minute news summary from ABC this morning here.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this Sunday. The president is spending the day in Bedminster, New Jersey, the last full day of his working vacation. President Trump's time away from Washington has been relatively quiet, a marked change from this time last year when he was forced to address the deadly violence in Charlottesville. The president's response to that hate-fueled riot triggered massive blowback. It also shined a harsh spotlight on the president's own attitude toward race. And it prompted a conversation still playing out about who we are as a nation.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
That was President Trump's initial response to last year's deadly Charlottesville rally, failing to specifically condemn neo-Nazis and white supremacists, arguably the low point of his presidency. 3 days later, this attempt at damage control.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Making an already bad situation worse. But fast forward to this weekend, another rally, and so far, a very different response. The riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. The president tweeted yesterday, "We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans." But as the president preaches peace, a former staffer is calling him out.
President of the United States use not only the N-word, but other horrible things during the production of The Apprentice.
Omarosa Manigault Newman, the former Apprentice villain turned White House advisor, describing Trump as a, quote, racist, misogynist, and bigot in her soon-to-be-published book obtained by the Washington Post. Here's what she told TMZ.
After the LeBron James situation, that the president is really causing tension with African Americans right now.
He wants to start a race war, succeeding.
But Omarosa's own words last year threatened to undermine her credibility.
Do you think this president is racist?
Absolutely not. I would never sit nor work for someone who I believe to be a racist.
The White House says Omarosa's book is, quote, riddled with lies and false accusations. Meanwhile, when it comes to race, President Trump is saying, look at my record.
African Americans, so many others. I said, what do you have to lose? You have high crime rates, you have horrible education. So what happened is the African American unemployment rate has reached the lowest level in the history of our country.
And that is one Trump claim that is true. African American unemployment did hit a low in May. But despite those numbers, only 36% of Americans say they approve of the way Trump is handling race relations. And among African Americans, only 3% approve. And joining us now is Congressman Elijah.
Oh, I'm actually not going to have any clips from Congressman Elijah Cummings, though he said some interesting things. And if you want to watch all of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, there's a link down in the video description to all the shows that I'm taking my clips from, at least to the extent they're available online. And I've been able to provide clips, provide links to where you can get the source of the clips. But like I said, I think that was the best news summary. There was some news making by Omarosa in there, but not so much that it overshadowed all the other news, like in the NBC Meet the Press news summary, which is basically all about Omarosa, so much so that I didn't even think it was worth showing. And actually, I was a little worried about showing. There was a clip from The Apprentice when Donald Trump fired Omarosa, which of course is an NBC show, and I was worried if I included that clip, would I get copyright? Would there be like some sort of copyright claim by NBC? I don't know, but that was one reason I didn't show. But the other was because I didn't think it was that newsworthy. Maybe even the ABC clip focused a little bit too much on Omarosa. You can let me know what you think, especially after I show the one Omarosa clip I'm going to show. But before I get to that, I want to contrast those two news summaries with the Fox News Sunday news summary, which, I mean, to their credit, they did sort of focus on the racism angle a little bit, but in a much gentler way. I think you'll agree, both with Martha MacCallum, the guest host this week, and of course Peter Doocy, who is son of the Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy, who does the news report. One thing I'm going to comment on after I show this clip, I have a couple criticisms, but one is the way that Martha MacCallum says that the Charlottesville violence from last year started based on a protest about the Robert E. Lee statue. And I will talk about that and a couple other things a little more after we watch that Fox News Sunday news summary from this morning here.
News in Washington. This weekend, white nationalists will use the White House as their backdrop as they take to the streets once again. What began last summer as a gathering to defend the statue of Robert E. Lee devolved into something much darker. The protesters and counter-protesters flooded the streets, and then a car driven by a suspected neo-Nazi plowed into the crowd in Charlottesville, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injuring 19 others. Today, the statue remains behind a barricade. Meanwhile, more violence in the city of Chicago, where they also have seen protests of their own now against the killings in their streets. 20 people were shot this weekend, 2 of them fatally. 3 children were wounded, including a 12-year-old girl, as the city adds 600 officers to patrol the streets after last weekend's brutal violence of 74 shootings that left 12 people dead. All of this as the president speaks out for unity and faces new criticism for some of his latest tweets going after NFL players who are once again protesting during our national anthem. Here to speak about all of this, Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, in just a moment. But first to Peter Doocy, who is live in Lafayette Park, the site of today's rally. Peter.
Good morning, Martha. There's a white civil rights rally planned for Lafayette Park this afternoon. White nationalist participants plan to meet in Northern Virginia, 15 miles or 10 metro stops away from here, to then ride the rails into the district. We don't know how many people plan to show up, but the permit requested room for as many as 400 protesters. There are also, though, planned counter protests nearby that could draw thousands. Today's event is called Unite the Right to. Speakers include former KKK leader David Duke, and it's happening here in D.C. because its organizer, Jason Kessler, was denied a permit to rally again in Charlottesville. Tensions in Charlottesville remain high this weekend for the anniversary of last year's Unite the Right rally, where a demonstration against the removal of a Robert E. Lee statue devolved into deadly chaos. Violence that President Trump was initially criticized for characterizing like this.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it.
The president's not going to be anywhere close to the White House today. He will remain in Bedminster, New Jersey. Last night, he hosted a Bikers for Trump event, and the biggest headline there was that he called Omarosa, a former White House staffer who wrote a book alleging that the president is a racist, a, quote, lowlife. The president has tweeted this weekend to broadly condemn racism and violence, but he has not specifically addressed today's event. Martha.
Peter, thank you very much. Peter Ducey reporting steps for...
So Peter Ducey, and hasn't specifically addressed today's event. Well, he also, in his tweet, didn't specifically address white nationalism, Nazis, white supremacy, any of that stuff. Which is what he got faulted for a year ago, was that, you know, the all sides. In his tweet that you saw mentioned in some of the news summaries there, he said that he condemns racism, all types of racism, which I think might be sort of like a signal to his base that he also condemns reverse racism, which I think Republicans, or at least Trump's base, tend to believe that reverse racism is more common than actual racism, which is bogus in my opinion. But I also had that criticism that I told you about before. I showed the clip where Martha MacCallum introduced it by saying that the problems in Charlottesville last year started with a protest over the Robert E. Lee statue. And I thought that when I watched the clip initially, and then the next show I watched after Fox News Sunday was CBS's Face the Nation, where Margaret Brennan tried to basically say the same thing to former vice presidential candidate and current Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia. And I think he may be running for president in 2020, since he was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential candidate. And I think he makes a good case as to why you shouldn't say it was about a protest over Robert E. Lee. And so there was no news summary on Face the Nation. And this is my only Face the Nation clip. And I thought it was a good juxtaposition to what Martha MacCallum said there. And it's a little under a minute, which I will discuss with you after we watch it together here.
Mayor of Richmond, though.
Yeah.
You dealt with some of these questions about how to represent the Confederacy here. This was the capital of the Confederacy.
Right.
Does it trouble you that those monuments are still standing?
It doesn't trouble me that they're still standing. It means we have to always be in dialogue about our history and the right way to represent them.
The rallying point, though, last year for the Unite the Right rally was the question of the removal of Robert E. Lee from Charlottesville.
That was not it, Margaret. I want to challenge you on that. Charlottesville was not about statues. It was about hatred. It was about bigotry and division. This was not a Save the Statue rally. It was a Unite the Right rally. Statues don't make you march around chanting, "Jews will not replace us." They don't make you say "blood and soil" or other slogans from Nazi youth rallies. I think the thing that's important to know about Charlottesville is to say it's about statues kind of diminishes the gravity of it.
Nationwide now, there's a lot of...
So I definitely agree with Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia there. And actually, I think I cut off the beginning of that clip where Margaret Brennan mentioned that he was mayor of Richmond, which was actually capital of the Confederacy. So he dealt with these issues all the way back from when he was mayor of Richmond. But I thought that was a good answer from Tim Kaine. And That's why and it criticizes the introduction from Martha MacCallum on the Fox News Sunday news summary I showed previously. I've been reading along my live viewers' comments, and even one of my Lulu Girl, one of my Super Chat contributors from the live comments, says there's streaming troubles tonight. I noticed when I started the show, YouTube tells me, if I had like there were some problems with the stream, like right in the first 5 minutes or so, but according to YouTube, the health of the stream has been good since like the first 5 minutes, and usually that means, at least as a recorded show, this should be viewable. So if you're having problems watching the live stream, I'm sorry about that. I've been having like internet problems all day, so it might be an Xfinity Comcast problem, but I'm gonna forge on forward with the show, and the next clip is actually the Omarosa clip that I promised, and I'm not going to show the whole Omarosa interview. Like I said, I thought it was overhyped, and I think the Omarosa book is overhyped. You're not going to see the Omarosa book up here on my bookshelf because, like I said, I don't think it's a substantial book, and I don't think she has a lot of credibility. And one of the reasons is because of what she says in this next clip, where one of the big revelations in her book is that she found out that Trump said the N-word on The Apprentice, and there are tapes of it, and one of the inconsistencies between her book and what she said in interviews is now she says that she's heard or she's seen the tapes herself, which isn't what she said in the book. And later she actually explains that, well, since she wrote the book, she's actually seen the tapes herself. But why that's kind of a bogus reason to finally come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is racist is something I will discuss after we watch this 1 minute 46-second clip of the much longer interview between Chuck Todd and Omarosa Omarosa Newman on NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Start with what you describe in your book as a year-long effort to learn the truth about a rumor that Donald Trump had been caught on tape using the N-word while working on The Apprentice. And here's how you wrote about confirming with a source that the tape does in fact exist. Page 322 of your book. On this phone conversation, I was told exactly what Donald Trump said. Yes, the N-word and others in a classic Trump goes nuclear rant. And when he'd said them, during production, he was mic'd, and there's definitely an audio track. For over a year, I'd been so afraid of hearing the specifics from someone who'd been in the room. Hearing the truth freed me from that fear. Did you hear the tape, or did you hear a description of the tape?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And in this book, I describe this long journey of hearing these rumors over and over again. And when I had an opportunity to meet up with 3 different sources, they describe the same exact statements. After I closed the book, I had an opportunity to go out in Los Angeles and sit down with the person who actually has a copy of the tape. And I heard his voice as clear as you and I are sitting here.
You have heard the tape?
I have heard
since
the
publication
tape.
Of this book?
Absolutely.
So you know it exists?
And I know it exists. And what I regret is that these people are probably trying to leverage it as this October surprise. I don't want to be a part of that. But I have heard for 2 years that it existed, and once I heard it for myself, it was confirmed what I feared the most, that Donald Trump is a con and has been masquerading as someone who is actually open to engaging with diverse communities. But when he talks that way, the way he did on this tape, it confirmed that he is truly a racist.
Why didn't you get that in your book?
Why didn't you get that in your book, which is about the N-word comment on The Apprentice? But that is not the question I would have asked Omarosa. Like, oh, that's what proved to you that Donald Trump is a racist? That he said the N-word on The Apprentice? That is, I mean, there are several things that are kind of ridiculous about that. And, I mean, the most ridiculous part about it is that, like I said, that is what would cause her to come to the conclusion finally that Donald Trump is a racist. And I say that based on there's so many different things over going back to the 1970s, I started to try to like make a list of them myself, and then I like Googled it and I found this Vox article. And this is not a complete list even from the Vox article. This is basically like all the things that I could think of from the 1970s to now that were like confirmed by the Vox News article if you want to. And of course, there's a link down in the video description. But, and some of the things on here like 2015, Trump announces campaign calling Mexicans rapists, bringing crime and drugs. That's like only one immigration thing on the list. And that doesn't include like the Muslim ban. That doesn't include family separation. That doesn't include, you know, the infestation comments. I mean, there, and even the Vox News article doesn't include, it was written in January 2018, so it doesn't include like all the rest of the racism this year. So, that's pretty ridiculous. Is there anyone out there who really thinks it's controversial to say that Donald Trump is racist? And by that, I don't know what's in his heart. Nobody can read his mind. But if you judge him on his actions, if you judge him on his history, he acts in a manner that is discriminatory against people of color. There's just... Do I have to put the list up again? There's like... And like I said, if you go to the Vox article, there's like another, that's only like a quarter of the incidents that you could put on such a list. Those are the ones that I thought were major. And anyway, so that's kind of ridiculous. But speaking of ridiculous, the next two clips I want to show you are the two Kellyanne Conway clips. I showed you Omarosa, which I had in the title of this video. I also have Kellyanne Conway, and these are the two clips where Kellyanne Conway is kind of trying to say that Trump isn't racist, and that and kind of reacting to what Omarosa said. And the first one is actually and this is going to be a contrast between ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Jonathan Karl guest hosting, and then Martha MacCallum guest hosting on Fox News Sunday. And this is one of the good questions you would ask Kellyanne Conway. She supposedly, Omarosa was a valued member of the Trump administration, and now she's saying all these horrible things, and she's a lowlife, according to Trump. So how do you like square that circle? And you'll see Jonathan Karl gives Kellyanne Conway a lot of rope to, or a lot of leeway to get out her talking points about how great Trump is for people of color and blacks, and it's, you know, the lowest unemployment rate and all that stuff, and then ask some pretty good follow-up questions that I will discuss with you after we watch this 6-minute, 5-second clip, which is not by any means the entire Jonathan Karl Kellyanne Conway interview. It's just because, you know, I've been a fan of Kellyanne Conway since she was Kellyanne Fitzgerald and used to appear on Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher, which I used to watch many years ago on ABC. This is again on ABC, but it's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Jonathan Karl, classic Kellyanne Conway, obfuscation, red herring, misinformation, spinning. I will discuss it with you after we watch the 6 minutes, 5 seconds together over here.
I want to ask you right away about these allegations from Omarosa. You've heard them, obviously. She says that she felt a growing realization that Donald Trump was indeed a racist, a bigot, and a misogynist. You seem to be quite close to Omarosa when she was at the White House, and when she left, you called her a very valued member of our team for a very long time. So what do you make of what she's saying now?
The first time I ever heard Omarosa suggest those awful things about this president are in this book. And I think that Omarosa, unfortunately, has undercut her own credibility, whether it's in the NPR interview, confusing a very central fact in the book, that she has never heard those alleged tapes, and then she said the tapes really changed it for me. And this is somebody who gave a glowing appraisal of Donald Trump, the businessman, the star of The Apprentice, the candidate, and indeed the President of the United States. She told your own network, John, ABC News, the day after she was fired from the White House that she had resigned. Now she's saying she was fired, that Donald Trump is not a racist. She said she never heard him use the N-word. Let me tell you something. 2 years ago today, Donald Trump asked me to be his campaign manager. I have worked alongside that man for over 2 straight years now without interruption. I have never a single time heard him use a racial slur about anyone. And I also never heard Omarosa complain that he had done that. And so the only thing that's changed is that she's now selling books. And look, I think Omarosa is a tremendous disappointment here because she should be taking credit for all the great gains that this president has made with respect to that low unemployment number among African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and others. She should take credit for the fact that in his first month in office, he took decisive executive action on behalf of HBCUs, workforce development, prison reform now, the drug crisis, which I've tried to work on with Mr. Cummings and others on his side of the aisle. This president is saying with prison reform that if you've paid your debt to society, that you should be given a second chance. And there are over 6.6 million available jobs now in the Trump economy. And we want everybody of every background to have the skills, the training, the education, the opportunity, and the dignity of work if they so desire. So I feel like Omarosa could have taken some credit for that, said, look, I worked in the White House for a full year, and I got the ball rolling with the president, but that doesn't sell books, and that doesn't settle scores. So I understand whether it's 30 pieces of silver or a 7-figure book advance, people do change their loyalties and change their mind. But I would refer you to Omarosa's own comments, very glowing appraisal of this president's work and this president's work with respect to the African American community. Omarosa also criticized the Congressional Black Caucus while she was in the White House for refusing to meet with the president.
So just to be clear, she says that she heard the president use racially charged language even in the White House, including...
She never said that to us in the White House, and I certainly have never heard it. But why didn't she tell us at the time? Why not tell ABC News the day after she was fired that that is, in fact, what she witnessed? She was asked explicitly the important question by your colleague at ABC News, John, and she said, no, he's not a racist. She said, I would not be there, and I wouldn't be there. None of us would be there if that were true. You've got to... I totally agree with Congressman Cummings that you should look at what people do. And this president has made tremendous gains on behalf of the African American community and continues to. And I do have to correct the record. You said that the president has never denounced a white supremacist. I want to read you his quote from August 14th of last year because it's missing from the conversation. And I quote, racism is evil. All those who cause violence in its names are criminals and thugs, quote, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
Kellyanne, as you know, the president also said there were very fine people on both sides in that rally. That was a rally led by neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
And he denounced them, but you're not covering that.
No, but he said there were very fine people on both sides.
Why does that matter? Why does it matter that you're not taking the totality of his comments over the stretch of days, John?
Well, because I think it's still a question. Who were the very fine people on the side of the neo-Nazis?
Well, he's telling you who's not. He's saying he denounces, quote, the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and all those who cause violence in the name. And yesterday, in a very, very strong statement, he said that last year there was senseless death and division. He's calling for unity among all Americans, and he denounced all forms of bigotry and acts of violence and racism.
Still not specifically calling out the neo-Nazis or the white supremacists who are...
You just don't cover it. Do you even have, excuse me, does ABC even have the quote in your file that you're able to put it up right now for all your viewers? Probably not. But I just read it.
I mean, I think the fact that he said very fine people on both sides, and one of the sides was led by neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
Whom he denounced.
I still don't understand.
He said they're criminals and thugs.
So who were the very fine people marching with the neo-Nazis?
White supremacists. He denounced all of them. You're just not covering it. But look, I agree with Congressman Cummings. You should go. I answered the question. But you've got to show all the quotes to be fair. And John, I totally agree with Congressman Cummings. We should see what people's records are. So why don't you go send a reporter to Chicago, to Baltimore, to Philadelphia, where the mayor of Philadelphia said, we're no longer going to give information to ICE, and a child was sexually abused by an illegal alien who should not have been there. Why don't you go cover the violence? And we've got an increase in homelessness, in crime, in violence in these major inner cities that are governed by Democratic mayors who have not lifted folks out of poverty, have not created the jobs my boss has created for them.
Kellyanne, the Omarosa was...
So I do have to give kudos or whatever to Jonathan Karl in his interview there with Kellyanne Conway for at least asking that question about the fine people who, who were the fine people marching on the side of the neo-Nazis. And you saw Kellyanne Conway claim she answered that question, but of course she didn't. After he said, "You're not answering my question," and she said, "I did answer your question," but you can go back and watch the whole 6 minutes, 5 seconds, and there's nowhere in there where she says who were the fine people who were marching on the side of the neo-Nazis. On the other hand, she she basically claimed that there was no evidence that Donald Trump had, done anything racist and or was racist. And there's all this, like, if I were cross-examining Kellyanne Conway, this is what I would be talking about, which I didn't see that whole list there. I didn't see brought up on any of the big five corporate outlets this morning, although sometimes they bring up some of the stuff from that list as context, but not this morning for some reason. I guess they didn't have enough time. But I think there was good parts to how ABC interviewed Kellyanne Conway. Not so much over on Fox News Sunday. I mean, they did actually ask her about some of these white supremacy questions here. This is maybe one of the only times you'll see on Fox News someone say that, Make America Great Again is Make America White Again. Although Martha MacCallum, the host here, guest host of Fox News Sunday, is asking it in sort of a pejorative way, maybe. I don't know. You can tell me what you think in the comment section, but this is a much gentler interview of Kellyanne Conway. And one other thing I wanted to mention is you notice she had all prepared this statement that Donald Trump made where he actually did denounce white supremacists and neo-Nazis a year ago. But what she doesn't mention is it was sandwiched in between two other statements. Like, first Donald Trump came out and said there was blame on both sides, and he got, excoriated in the press for that. And so then he came out and read this statement, which was obviously written for him, where he, denounced neo-Nazis and white supremacists. That's the statement that Kellyanne Conway's reading. And then it was after that that he came out and said that, there were fine people on both sides. So she's mentioning the middle statement, which I guess nobody really had time to point out, but she mentions that same statement again, which without any cross-examination, with very gentle cross-examination or any examination at all from Martha MacCallum, who I think actually is a lawyer, and Kellyanne Conway's also a lawyer, though now a pollster and communications senior counsel to the president. And this is the 4-minute.
Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence.
Second clip of.
So this is not unique to President Trump in terms of people wanting to improve relations. I think we should all agree that we always want relations to improve among people of different backgrounds and different races. Secondly, I think you've got to look at President Trump's record with respect to men and women of color. The record low unemployment rate among African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and others is remarkable, and it's owing to his policies, his bold leadership, that there are so many more people of color who are able to access these new jobs in manufacturing, in professional industries, as well in mining as well. Carpentry is way up. And yet this president also is for school choice and charters. He is trying to give those who are trapped in conventional school systems that are failing these students another choice. The prison reform initiative that Jared Kushner and President Trump have put forth is meant to help all people of all races, but we know disproportionately many of our prisons, those are African Americans who are languishing in these prisons, those who have paid their debt to society, Martha, and can re-enter to have the skills, education, the opportunities, and indeed make themselves available for these 6.6 million jobs that are out there. This is a president who's doing all of that. And even my former colleague in the West Wing, Omarosa, agreed with much of that when she was there.
Well, I want to talk about that in a moment. But, you know, when you look at the disparity in the numbers, when President Obama left office, 37% said that he had made race relations worse. And as I pointed out just a moment ago, the number for the president right now is that 57% of those asked believe that he has made relations worse. So given the fact that, as you point out, the unemployment numbers are better for minorities, and all of the efforts that the president has made, which you just mentioned, that are trying to lift all boats, there still seems to be that feeling, as his critics say, that he doesn't want to make America great again. He wants to make America white again. Can he be more articulate, more outspoken on this issue? And, you know, it goes to one of the other things that we talked about this week, the tweets about the NFL players. Some people say he's tougher on NFL players and athletes than he is on the movements that we're about to see this afternoon in Washington.
Well, that's just a terrible thing to say. This president last August 14th said the following. It doesn't get much coverage, so I'm going to read it. Quote, racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. That quote doesn't get much play. That was the President of the United States, President Trump, last August 14th, denouncing specifically KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, after already, and before that and after that, denouncing racism, bigotry, hatred, and violence, as he did again yesterday. As for the national anthem, the president made very clear that he believes it's not a big ask to have people stand for the flag and the national anthem at football games and elsewhere, and that separately, Martha, if these professional athletes want to go back into their communities or anywhere they want, where they have considerable platforms and in most cases very big popularity, that they should go ahead and make their voices known there. On the field, when people go to play for a football game, it sounds like the NFL's new policy actually agreed with this. They said if you're going to be on the field, you can't be kneeling, you can stay in the locker room. Well, there you go.
Let me go back to Omarosa Manigault, because she's speaking out as
And I'm not going to get to the rest of the Kellyanne Conway interview on Fox News Sunday, but you notice how they mixed in the NFL controversy there and let Kellyanne Conway sort of pump up the Trump base with the people who don't want to respect the anthem and our flag, when, of course, that's not what the NFL players are protesting at all. It's actually this police shootings of black men especially, and of people of color in general, that are way out of proportion to their the amount, their percentages of the population. And of course, the other thing I forgot to mention about clip number 5, the Fox News news summary, is that they also put in the whole, like, so-called black on black crime response that you always hear on Fox News. They talked about the violence in Chicago in the news summary as some sort of juxtaposition to the whole racism issue, which that's totally bogus, ridiculous. I mean, you know where the problems in the inner cities come from in terms, are also part of racist policies. If you've read the New Jim Crow here by Michelle Alexander, this book has been up here pretty much the entire time I've been doing my Sunday Live Clip Roundup. If you want to know more about the racism inherent in the system, I highly recommend you read that book. But that, of course, was not something that came up as a follow-up, and the only real follow-up from Martha MacCallum in the Kellyanne Conway interview clip I just showed was, well, polls show that people think that Donald Trump is worse on race relations than Obama. How can that be? And she, of course, did not bring up the many ways in which Donald Trump is actually engaged in acts that seem to be racist that I talked about earlier. Of course, that didn't come up on any of the Sunday morning news analysis shows. But I did want to show one thing that happened on Fox News, even though this is not a Fox News clip. This is an NBC Meet the Press clip where Chuck Todd is interviewing Ohio Governor John Kasich, who may or may not run for president in 2020 as some sort of moderate alternative to Donald Trump and might split the Republican Party, which would, of course, be good for whoever is the Democrat, maybe, but who knows how that would turn out. But that is discussed by Chuck Todd and John Kasich later in the interview in a clip I'm not showing you. But this shows you why I think that John Kasich and most of the Republican Party are like big, are cowards, I guess is the word I should use when it comes to the whole racism issue. This is about something that Laura Ingraham said on Fox News earlier this week, where she talked about demographic changes being foisted on the American people that nobody voted on and most of us don't like. And it had to do with immigration, including legal immigration. You won't see the whole clip, I think, in this question that Chuck Todd asks Ohio Governor John Kasich. But the thing is, the word demographic means like age, sex, race, ethnicity, maybe religion are demographic characteristics. And then later when Laura Ingraham said that when she said demographic, she didn't mean race. What does that mean? She thinks that there are like too many old immigrants. There are too many male immigrants. There are too many, well, maybe it's Islamic, but that would be racist kind of too. But if you say demographic, she's basically, that is racist. And John Kasich won't say Laura Ingraham is racist. And this is the final clip in the Trump and racism topic before I get to my clip, or the final topic where I will show one clip of Rudy Giuliani and then commit legal analysis on what is a perjury trap. But this is John Kasich refusing to say Laura Ingraham is racist when she said something that Laura Ingraham said something racist that was clearly racist in this 2-minute, 21-second clip from NBC's Meet the Press this morning over here.
Quickly, there's been some discomfort from some corners about some commentaries that have taken place on Fox News in prime time. Given you're a former Fox News host, I want to get you to react to what Laura Ingraham said this week. Take a listen to it, sir.
In some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for and most of us don't like.
Reaction?
You know, she said that this didn't have anything to do about race, but, you know, and I know her a little bit. I'm not going to say that she was saying this because of race, but what I am saying is this kind of language of division is not helpful to us, Chuck. And so, look, at the end...
Do you worry, though, I mean, if you think about it, this issue with the Republican base, they talked to it. They talked to the Republican base directly. Has that made your job harder inside the Republican Party?
You know, Chuck, I think one of the things that's happening is that people have been not everybody, but many have been increasingly unwilling to put themselves in the shoes of somebody else. Even when you think about family separation at the border, some people say, well, you know, they had a choice. They didn't need to go there. Well, many of them had to go there to save their kids' lives, literally, okay? Right. So, look, Chuck, I don't want to just be doing this, some sort of religious hour here.
I understand.
But I think what's fundamentally changed our country is that many people have not come to understand what faith is, which is loving your neighbor, elevating others sometimes in front of yourself, putting yourself in other people's shoes. And when we don't do that, we lose the essence of our country. When my father and my uncle talked about the Great Depression, everybody pulled together. And what we're seeing now is people pulling apart rather than coming together. And I think that's an element of religiosity. If you're a humanist, I love you anyway because, you know, you believe in making a better tomorrow, but we need the compass back. And I frankly believe it comes from on high. Faith, togetherness, we can do it.
Back that special election.
So John Kasich not only won't say that what Laura Ingraham said was racist, even though as I said before, I showed the clip, what did she mean by massive demographic changes? Not age, not sex. It's got to be race/ethnicity or religion. I don't know, but whatever is left is pretty racist. But John Kasich, even the moderate Republicans won't call out. It's kind of like police officers where, you know, they say there are a few bad apples, but then the rest of the non-bad apple police officers will never, like, call out the bad apples. They just let them continue, you know. So John Kasich is letting Laura Ingraham be racist without calling her out for being racist, even though he's one of the good ones, supposedly. But that's the final clip on Trump and racism. You can let me know what you think about my analysis of that down in the comment section. And the final clip I want to show you, well, I actually have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip. Sandy's kind of like snoring over there in the corner by my American Constitutional Law book, and that's not the Dash and Sandy clip I'll be showing you. So, like I promised at the beginning of the show, when I showed this teaser clip of Rudy Giuliani here.
I mean, why would I say something that isn't true?
Why would he say something that's not true? I have no idea, but I might have a little better idea after we watch the 5.5-minute clip from CNN State of the Union where Rudy Giuliani tries to explain what a perjury trap is, but he doesn't even come close to explaining what a real perjury trap is. And by the way, for those of you who are my loyal viewers and stayed tuned to the end of the video here where I'm talking about what a perjury trap is, in this part of the video I will show this clip, and down in the video description you can see some law review articles about what a perjury trap is, and of course the National Review article by Andrew McCarthy that Rudy Giuliani refers to in this interview with Jake Tapper. But I'm not going to show any of the actual, what I could do is take screenshots from actual federal cases and explain why what Rudy Giuliani is saying in this clip is contrary to the law of what a perjury trap is, and use screenshots from cases, and I could make an edited produced video on this topic. So if you want me to actually do that and make it slicker than this sort of extemporaneous explanation of why what Rudy Giuliani is saying is bogus legally, I have a poll. You can click on this little eye in the corner here and tell me if do you want me to make like a slicker edited produced video on why the Trump perjury trap argument is bogus legally, something. I don't know what I would title it. You can tell me what you want me to title it if you suggest the title down in the comment section. But anyway, I will explain why the perjury trap argument is bogus after we watch Donald Trump's so-called lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, talk to Jake Tapper for a little over 5.5 minutes in the final clip before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip over here.
There's been a lot of news this week about the back and forth with the special counsel about whether there's going to be an interview. I want to play for you the rationale you've offered as to why you don't want the president to be questioned about his dealings with then FBI Director James Comey. Take a listen.
We're walking him into a possible perjury trap, not because he isn't telling the truth, but because somebody else isn't telling the truth, who they would credit, namely Comey. They have
That's a problem.
Indicated to us, even in our discussions, a preference for Comey, a preference for some of these other people.
How exactly has the Mueller team led you to believe they have a preference for Comey, that they would side with him? What have they said?
Well, first of all, I mean, we haven't talked to them. I haven't talked to them in about 2 months, so this goes back 2 months ago. Also, it goes back to conversations they had with John Dowd, who I talked to several times a week. I guess the clearest one is that we've offered to give them what you call a proffer. In other words, we'll tell them the president's answers to everything. They already know them. Let me give you a simple example. Flynn. The president says he never told Comey that he should go easy on Flynn. Comey says the president did. He put it in his memo. Now, we do have a prior contradictory statement by Comey under oath to the contrary, but put that aside. That is if we ever had a trial, and I don't think we will. So if he goes in and testifies to that under oath, instead of just this being a dispute, they can say it's perjury if they elect to believe Comey instead of Trump, and they should know by now who they believe.
Right, but you've said that they've indicated that they already side with Comey, and I'm wondering what have they said to lead you to that impression?
That's what they said. They said they're not willing to tell us what their purpose is for asking that question, since they already know the answer. So, you know, we've been doing this a long time, Jay and I know the purpose for it. The purpose for it is to write up some kind of perjury thing. That's what we mean by it. There's an article in National Review this week by Andy McCarthy, who was a very fine prosecutor, that explains how you put together a perjury trap, and this is probably a perfect example of it.
You said one reason why the president doesn't need to sit for questions about his dealings with Comey is because he's already given his explanations. He's already made them public. I just want to be clear exactly what happened in that conversation with Comey about Michael Flynn. What exactly did President Trump say?
There was no conversation about Michael Flynn. The president didn't find out that Comey believed there was until about, I think it was February when it supposedly took place. Memo came out in May. And in between, Comey testified under oath that in no way had he been obstructed at any time. And then all of a sudden, in May, he says he felt obstructed. He felt pressured by that comment. You should go easy on Flynn. So we maintain that the president didn't say that. But if we do that under oath, we end up in a sort of Martha Stewart situation.
But Mr. Mayor, you told ABC News last month that the president told Comey, quote, "Can you give him a break?" Now you're saying that they never had...
I never told ABC that. That's crazy. I mean, I've never said that. What I said was, that is what Comey is saying Trump said. I have always said the president denies it. Look, it'd be easier for me if the president did say that. Jay and I could defend that. The statement, "go easy on him," is hardly an obstruction. Obstruction involves a threat. Obstruction involves false testimony. Obstruction involves an offer of money. It has to be corrupt. Just saying, exercise your prosecutorial discretion to give a general a break. I had that happen all the time to me when I was a prosecutor.
So you're saying that President Trump and James Comey never discussed Michael Flynn?
That is what he will testify to if he's asked that question. They already know that. So why are they asking us for him to repeat what they already know under oath?
And you're also saying that a month ago you didn't tell ABC News that he said something along the lines of can you give him a break?
No, I did not. I said that is what Comey says.
I just want to play for you, because earlier in the interview I was talking about a comment you made to ABC News a month ago about what exactly President Trump said to Comey. You're now saying that the president tells you that he said nothing.
I've been saying that from the beginning.
Okay, but I'm
talking about Comey's rendition.
I just want to play the sound so people understand why I asked the question.
Sure. Okay.
How is he a good witness for the president if he's saying that the president was asking him, directing him, in his words, to let the Michael Flynn investigation go?
He didn't direct him to do that. What he said to him was, can you give him a break?
Comey says he...
So you didn't direct him to. What he said was, can you give a break? You said that. I mean,
I said it, but I also said before that I'm talking about their version of it. Look, lawyers argue in the alternative. I know it's complicated, but my goodness, we've been over it long enough that I mean, why would I say something that isn't true? I mean, the president didn't say to him, go easy on Flynn or anything about Flynn. He's saying that. I am talking about their alternative. I'm saying the conversation never took place. But if it did take place, and here's the conversation that's alleged, it is not illegal to have said that. That's what I'm saying. We call it arguing in the alternative.
All right, it was a little confusing, I suppose.
So I appreciate that, but I've been asked the question numerous times. That's the answer, and if I confused it, I'm sorry.
He should be sorry, and good thing for Rudy Giuliani that he wasn't under oath when he was answering those questions, because he might have indulged in a little bit of perjury there. But I wanted to show the end of that clip because I edited two parts of the interview together. There was like a 4 or 5 minute gap in there where I think Jake Tapper's producers went and got the ABC clip so that he could follow up and show Rudy Giuliani the clip where he said that Trump didn't say to Comey to stop the investigation of Michael Flynn, just to, can you go easy on him, which he has this story where, so many people said that to me when I was a prosecutor, but were any of them your boss? That's what's so bogus about that stupid justification that I hear from Rudy Giuliani over and over again. But what I promised to talk about is the so-called perjury trap that Rudy Giuliani, and that's the big question, will Trump testify to the grand jury like Robert Mueller wants him to do? And there's all these negotiations, and they're saying they shouldn't do it because it's a perjury trap. But if you look at the links I've put down in the video description, you'll find out that a perjury trap is an affirmative defense, a form of entrapment. That means that it has to be prosecutorial misconduct. And one of the weird things about it is there are no actual federal cases where someone has got a successful motion to dismiss based on this perjury trap defense. Basically, it's a theory that has never happened in practice. That's the thesis of the 2010 Texas Law Review article. I put a link to an excerpt down in the video description. If I actually make an edited, produced video, if you want me to do that, there's a poll about that over here. If you click on this little eye, you can tell me whether you want me to do that or not. And if I do that, I'll have to go to the law library and actually get that article instead of just the excerpt you can see down in the video description. But if you look at the sentence with footnote 4, it says there have been no federal cases with a successful motion to dismiss based on a perjury trap, because it's almost like impossible theory, because for it to be a perjury trap, it's not just that the prosecutor thinks that you're going to come in and lie. Like, of course, Robert Mueller assumes Trump is going to lie about so many different things if he comes in and testifies. It has to be that the prosecutor is asking you about something that has nothing to do with an investigation or a crime. And in fact, by one interpretation, the entire grand jury investigation has to be illegitimate itself, not based on any crime or any possible crime, which is, I think you can't really say the Mueller investigation is that illegitimate, although, of course, Trump and Fox News have been trying to create that insinuation for many, many months now. But the other thing that makes it almost impossible is the prosecutor has to bring you in front of the grand jury and then ask you questions that have nothing to do with a crime. Like, they bring you in front of the grand jury and then say, have you ever cheated on your wife, which is totally immaterial to the grand jury investigation, and then you lie about it so your wife doesn't find out, right? But the thing is, to be charged with perjury, one of the elements of perjury is that the thing you lie about is material to the investigation. So if they ask you something that's not material to the investigation, then that's not perjury. So that's why it's like it's a total contradiction. That's pointed out in the Texas Law Review article. So the thing about the Rudy Giuliani interview is he points to this National Review article by Andrew McCarthy. And is Andrew McCarthy a lawyer now? I remember him from like St. Elmo's Fire and Mannequin. Is it the same guy? Now he's writing for National Review? No, it must be a different Andrew McCarthy, I guess. But I read his article, and there's a link to his article down in the video description, and he never mentions what a perjury trap actually is, like the other couple links I put down in there explain. And like I said, a perjury trap means that the whole grand jury is illegitimate, the question's illegitimate, this whole court is out of order. It's like Al Pacino in Justice for All. This whole court is out of order, and there's never even been a successful affirmative defense of perjury trap ever in federal court, at least since in 2010 when that Texas Law Review article was written. So anyway, that whole perjury trap argument that Giuliani and the Trump lawyers are making that's I don't think that word means what you think it means if you've ever seen the Princess Bride. And anyway, that's my perjury trap analysis. If you want me to, that was just sort of like extemporaneously and without a whole bunch of screenshots from cases. But if you would actually like me to make a more coherent, slick, streamlined argument about why Trump's perjury trap argument is bogus. In fact, is that Trump perjury trap argument bogus ? That might be a good title. You can tell me what you think the title should be for that video, and you can tell me in this poll here whether you think I should make that video at all. And anyway, that is my final clip and final analysis for tonight. I appreciate all of you who showed up for the live show, especially the Super Chat contributors. I took a screenshot of those people here. Thank you very much, and especially because I put the word racism in the title of this video, and so I'm really worried that it's not going to be monetized, or at least a lot of the views are not going to be monetized because I'm talking about racism, and that's controversial. And anyway, so thank you for the Super Chat contributions. Thanks for the people who give me direct PayPal contributions or who are my monthly patrons on Patreon. There are links down in the video description. That's why I was making this motion before. Was that weird? Without saying down in the video description to just be like pointing down. Well, that's why I was pointing down. You can support me down there, or just support me with a thumbs up, supportive comments. I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live show, watched the recorded show, and I promised a Sandy and Dash clip. This is Sandy and Dash this morning. I got that rare unicorn Sandy and Dash together clip because they're both hungry before breakfast. And if you look in the, not this side, if you look over in the left upper corner of the video that I'm about to show, like right over here, for my younger viewers, what you will see is something called a CD tree. Back in the olden days, this is where people my age used to store music after we bought it on these discs that were called CDs, which I'm not going to talk about after we watch that final 19 seconds together here. So that's the show. Thanks for joining me. I hope you appreciated all these clips I picked out, my commentary and criticism, analysis, and I will be back next week. Maybe I will have time this week to make that perjury trap video. If you want me to do that, let me know in the poll up here. And until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet. Okay, Sandy. I'm stopping.